Was there ever something that held us all together as Americans that was as binding of an experience as it is to be French or to be Chinese or to be anybody else?
I think maybe I'm going to answer this question yes or no, yes and no, because you want to say as much, right? Well, maybe not as much, because if you're Chinese, you know that Chinese civilization is literally 5,000 years old, right? And your ancestors on that soil, you may not know the names back more than 2-3 generations, go back millennia, right? And you're part of a culture that's gone through all kinds of, now, China really only becomes China about 2,000 years ago as we know it, but that's still long. 2,000 years is a long time. The English have very clear records of monarchs and aristocracies and parliamentary debates and bills and laws being passed going back, almost a millennium too, or if not more than a millennium. But the Magna Carta is 1215, for God's sake. So I don't think the United States can have a national identity that's as deep rooted as some of these other countries, right? But did it have something like that we deliberately fractured? And by the way, some of these other, the Chinese are in better shape than we are, because as evil as their leadership is in many ways, they're not dumb enough to deliberately fracture the national identity of the population. Whereas things aren't great right now in the national cultures of England or France. I'd say Britain is worse off than France by some significant degree, but France has got its own problems. And I say that not to bash France. I love France, but we did put together, chapter 2 is all about this. And it's the chapter that I think I've gotten the most criticism for, not because I've gotten 2 criticisms for it. One is people said, boring. It reads like a master's thesis or something, and like academic, who cares? And then from the right, I get, that's Anton trying to keep civic nationalism alive when he should know by now that it's totally dead and there's no hope for it. And I want to say, first of all, is the problem is the ditch that we're in right now owing to civic nationalism? And in part, I answer that the founders didn't have a choice. They had to adopt civic nationalism, right? Because the facts on the ground in 1776, as we form the social compact with the Declaration of Independence, is the country is already a multi-ethnic society. Now, it's not as multi-ethnic as it is now, but it wasn't like we could just say, hey, this is New England and we're all English. Well, we got all these other, it was already pluralistically religious. It had a lot of regional, ethnic, religious, and other differences. And it had to see Englishness and Frenchness and Chineseness and Japaneseness come together over centuries and millennia, and nobody knows how it happened. Historians spend all their time, reading as many old books as they can. Archaeologists go around and digging and finding the roots of this, and they find, wow, look at this building that, dates from 75 years before the earliest dwelling we had ever found here before. Right? And they're trying to piece it together. But in the case of all of those nations, nobody sits down in an assembly in Philadelphia or wherever one day and says, we are splitting off from you and we are becoming us. Sign here. Right? And that explicitly forms the social compact. All of a sudden we are, as the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence says, we are then one people. How do we bind those people together? Well, that's one of the ways that they did it. And it's not the only way. John Jay says in Federalist 2, how lucky we are to be so alike in our habits and sentiments, right? To cherish the same principles of government, to have similar ways of life, to have a similar type of religion, to have a common language, right? And we just fought the Revolutionary War. Nothing brings people together in a way like struggle does. It's the same story you hear about these guys who haven't seen each other. They see each other once a year for 50 years, but like 9 months in a combat situation somewhere bonds them for life. So the Revolutionary War did that for the American people. So I get these critics to my right who say, the idea of what it means to be an American has become so ridiculously abstract that we just basically say everybody in the world is a potential American, and so we can invite as many tens of millions of people as we want, and America's an idea, and all you have to do is accept the idea, and you're American, and there's nothing to American. And they say that's total hogwash, and I agree with them. That is total hogwash. But I wish my critics would be more willing to concede the fact that um, the American way of doing it has worked in the sense that, like, just take my own ancestors, right? Of my 8 great grandparents, 6 are Italian, 1 was Greek, and 1 was Lebanese. All of whom got here in a period between about 1880 and 1910, initially. Neither myself nor any of my relatives nor my children feel we're totally American. Just completely, totally Americanized. Welcomed into the social compact, completely assimilated into the culture in every way, and like that shows the success, what America can do when these processes are working. And I can point to a lot of different people. One of my teachers, one of Harry Jaffe's best students, his parents got him out of Hungary in 1956 as the Russians rolled in when he was 10 years old, and he grew up in Hollywood. Went to Hollywood High, the literal Hollywood High on Hollywood I think it's on Sunset Boulevard. Anyway, where Lana Turner went, and was discovered at the soda fountain by a talent scout and this stuff. Peter Schramm was his name. He died a few years ago, right? Schramm, born in Hungary, 10 years in Hungary, learned perfect English, completely Americanized by America, completely. His old quip used to be that he was born American, but in the wrong place, right? So if I'm willing, more than willing, because I think it's right, and I attack those notions of America as an abstraction. I attack it pretty vigorously in the book to say, yeah, America is not just an idea. There's more to it than that. But I wish the people to my right who criticize me would admit America has been successful at doing exactly the thing that they say can't be done. There was no way in 1770, like if the only way for nationhood to be real is centuries-rooted ethnic identity, then you have to say the American Revolution was completely unjust and shouldn't have happened, and there should never have been an America. Now, that's the left-wing position today. There should never have been an America because America is fundamentally evil. If the right is going to be on the same spot as the left on the question of the existence and the justice of the existence of America, then I got to step back and say goodbye to both of them.
So one time you say there's not an American consciousness that binds us together anymore.
Because the left has spent 50 years hammering away at it and fracturing it.
Yeah.
Just smashing it, right? Exactly as what Arthur Schlesinger warned about. That was about halfway into the process when he wrote that book. And now the process has been completed. Except that I still say that there's, I don't know what it is, there's 40%, there's 50%, maybe 60% of the population, whatever it is. I say in the book somewhere that, it's in chapter 2. I say the people that I'm speaking to are people who identify as American and only as American. And those people exist by the tens of millions in this country. The problem is that there are tens of millions who feel the exact opposite, and they control all the commanding heights of discourse, power, money, and so on.
I'm a little confused, and pardon me for being elementary on this. No amount of propaganda or politicizing will change the ethnic nature of being Chinese and China. Propaganda and ideas and discourse and whatever you're saying is chipping away and destroying what it is to be American. So by that, am I understanding that this American consciousness is a concept, not a blood, a language, a history, but really an idea?
I think it's both, right? So let's say one of the outcomes that I outlined in chapter 7 comes to pass, right? The left gets back into total power, push the pedal to the floor, crash the system, and the American system ceases to function at some point in the future, right? There will still be people alive on the North American continent. Granted, unless there's, a real pandemic that kills everybody or a nuclear war or something. People are going to be alive here. They're not going to have a government. They're going to self-organize. They're going to do exactly what Aristotle says people do in the politics. He says people do, which is they come together to do jointly what cannot be done or cannot be done well alone, right? They're going to do that. Now, I don't know about you. Let's just pick any part of the country you want. Montana, Idaho, Wisconsin, Michigan, Tennessee, Arkansas, the Texas Panhandle, the Oklahoma Panhandle, and you get a bunch of these people together. Are they all going to suddenly say, well, I'm actually not American. I'm Italian, so I'm going to found a little Italian republic here, and I'll just get all the Italians together. By the way, do any of you speak Italian? Well, My Nona did, but she's been dead since 1965. I can boil spaghetti though. If everybody tries to break down their own ethnic, say, I'm going to revert to my true roots. I don't think my sense is there are probably some people in America who feel that way, that like I'm truly this, but I live here. But I think most people feel like, no, I'm truly American. And then the other problem is, how many of us are a majority one ethnicity or the other? I mean, I'm 3/4 Italian, which is actually for a lot of people I know, more dominated by one particular ethnicity than a lot of people. I was like, well, I'm French and I'm English and maybe I have a little Cherokee Indian if you're Elizabeth Warren, but then like they can name 6, 7 different things and none of them is a majority. So what are you in that case? So in addition to that, I don't think, in my experience, this is not the way Americans think in their own heart, but I also think it's just going to be completely impractical. And then what are we going to do? So the wokerati break the United States of America, and the people still alive on the North American continent must reorganize themselves. I mean, are we going to like try to carve out well, this is for the Italians, but what if you're half Italian? And what if you're like, and then this one's for the Greeks and this one's for the, how's that going to work? And then, that's before you even get into the question of other ethnicities. I don't think people have really quite thought this through. I think their hatred, civic nationalism for certain quarters of the right has just become a hate term, a kind of a swear term. And so rather than try to think through practical reality on this, they just try to find people who they say adhere to it, and therefore those are the bad guys. And that's really why I wrote the boring and pedantic, oh my God, my publisher's going to shoot me. The allegedly boring and pedantic chapter 2, because I think all this stuff has to be thought through. And I'd rather provoke a bunch of people to write back at me that I was wrong and it was terrible, but force them to start thinking about it than just leave these questions out lying there.
I have been involved in politics more intensely than in my life in the last 5 years. I wrote a book called Democrat to Deplorable. I was a lifelong Democrat voter, Obama voter. Around 2014, 2015, I saw all these writings on the wall. I supported Trump. I wrote a book all about it. Why? And I see so many echoes from mine is more of like on the ground, the stories of people who had the same transformative experience. And then yours is sort of coming at it from a historical and a high level view. But one of the things that I consistently struggled with, I'm half Irish, half Ashkenazi. My family came here late 19th, early 20th century. I feel 100% American. I hear the magic dirt arguments or counter arguments. I hear people trashing civic nationalism. Back in 2016, we had, more unsavory people in the coalition stressing ethno divisions and whatnot. And I still haven't zeroed down and just been able to succinctly say, what is this American consciousness that is uniquely American, and is it an idea, or is it a heritage, or is it a history, or is it language? And so for me, that chapter was really pertinent and fantastic, and I think it's a key argument in sort of forming this anti-globalist, neoliberal, neoconservative identity, right?
Great point, and we can make so the iconoclasm of 2020, where we're going to rename everything and tear down statues, and we're going to kind of do what what is an iconoclast? He's somebody who goes into churches and he busts up the art because it's in his religious puritanical view offensive to God. That beautiful, it offends the commandment against graven images. That's the idea. Okay, I have no strand of DNA in me that's present in North America before 1888. None. And yet I revere George Washington as if he's the father of my country. Now, to a strict ethno-nationalist, he would say that I suffer from false consciousness or something, right? Oh, you can't claim that, but I can claim Garibaldi, even though I wasn't born in Italy. I didn't grow up speaking Italian. I had to teach myself to read Italian so that I could learn Machiavelli. And I love visiting Italy. It's great. It's fun. I like the food, the architecture, but I don't feel at home there. I don't feel Italian there. Now, if my life went sideways in some way and I had to flee, right? Italy, there are worse places you could end up. I like the food. I like the tailoring. There's a lot of things. I like the wine. There's a lot of things I like about it. But like that kind of persistent. And the other point too that I would make. So again, I feel only loyal to America. I feel only loyal to Americans. I am inspired by American heroes and heritage and the past as if it's my history. I guess, yes, there's something irrational about that in a certain way. But I'd have to say, why, like, just because somebody was born in Italy, does that legitimize being, say, proud of Michelangelo? Where I was born in America, but I can't be proud of George Washington because my DNA doesn't trace to 1776 there. But if my DNA traced to, it's a kind of weird argument that I don't get, that I don't think adds up. I don't think I'm stating this precisely, but what they want to say is, well, you're an alien. Well, I guess then everybody's in it. I mean, if you go in that direction, you're feeding into the left-wing line of thought, which is that America is illegitimate, right? So if we all have to be ethno-nationalists, well then, what's so magical about getting on a boat from Europe, coming to America, but those people are okay because they're with the American. Well, why did you leave it? Why aren't you English, right? Well, I'm Mayflower stock, so I can be American, but you can't because your ancestors came later, right? Well, why? Then that means you're English. You should be loyal to that, not to this. There only is America because a bunch of people came here and made America, right? And the reason why this confuses people is because we saw it happen in the modern age when there are much more complete records and so on. I could ask the same question about, so what makes when does an English person become an English person, right? There's Britons on the British Isle, then the Romans come, then they intermarry. Are we English yet? Why are the Anglo-Saxons called Anglo-Saxons? Saxony is in Germany. It's because a bunch of people from Northern Europe come over and settle. Are they English? Then you get the Norman conquest in 1066. Have we gotten there yet? Now, from that point on until the mass migrations following World War II, the English population was very, very stable. It's basically the same. There was almost zero net immigration, and a little bit here and there, but very, very, very stable. But Englishness somehow is banged together over the course of 1,000 years without an obvious migratory movement that you get from Northern Europe to the North American continent, to the founding of the United States, and of course without a signing ceremony. This is what confuses people. So they think like, well, that's the natural way to do it. Well, if that's the natural way to do it and the only way to do it in this way is illegitimate, then you've sort of bought the left-wing argument that there shouldn't be an American. No one from Europe should ever come to America, right? If your ethnic status is the thing, then both the Puritans and the Cavaliers, they're just English and they should never have left, right? And the other thing that bothers me, that I find inconsistent about this argument, is people say, no, the tradition is the only thing. We have to get back to tradition. All right, fair enough. I'm not against tradition. I'm actually pro-tradition in a lot of ways, if it's a good tradition. But then that gets you into the whole philosophical question of how do you evaluate tradition? You have to have a philosophical framework, right? Plato and Aristotle would say, because there's an idea of the good, and I can evaluate anything in the light of that. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's good necessarily. But all right.
Or bad.
Or bad. Yeah, right. Well, we have to get back to tradition. Okay, well, the American tradition is fighting the revolution. The American tradition is the Declaration of Independence. The American tradition is the Constitution and the Northwest Ordinance and the Bill of Rights and all of these things. So in the name of tradition, are we supposed to reject our tradition? We're Americans, we're for tradition. But my God, we really do hate the revolution, which gave birth to this country. And we really do hate the fundamental charters of our liberties, which are too abstract and enlightenment. We're supposed to, so what tradition are we supposed to go back to? Some medieval tradition?
I'm very sympathetic to this argument.
They haven't not sorted this out. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now who are saying, aha, can I use like semi-bad language on this podcast?
Yeah, dude, go ahead.
He's a cuck, right? Yeah. He's a civnat. We knew it all along. I'm like, have at it. But I would ask people who want to make that argument, buy the book. I could use the money, but leave that aside. Read chapter 2 with care and see if you can give me an actual point-by-point refutation of it, because I'd love to read it.